The commercial airliner shuddered through turbulence at 38,000 feet, passengers gripping armrests as overhead compartments rattled. In seat 7A, a woman in her late 40s sat with her eyes closed, noise-canceling headphones resting around her neck, untouched coffee cooling on her tray table. Her hands were steady. They had been steady through worse. The flight attendant noticed her first, the way she tracked the aircraft's movements with subtle shifts in posture, the slight tilt of her head when the engines changed pitch. There was something about her, something the attendant couldn't place. The woman's name was Nadia Kress, though that name meant nothing to anyone on the plane. But 23 years ago, another name had meant everything to a squadron pinned down in the Helmand Valley. The turbulence worsened. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, professional but tight. "Folks, we're experiencing some unexpected weather. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened." Nadia opened her eyes. They were gray, the color of storm clouds over the Hindu Kush. She looked out the window at the wing flexing against wind shear, then forward toward the cockpit door. Something was wrong, not the turbulence, something else. The Boeing 737 dropped suddenly, a sickening lurch that sent screams through the cabin. Oxygen masks deployed with a mechanical gasp. Nadia's hands moved immediately to secure her own mask, then helped the elderly man beside her, her movements economical practiced. The intercom crackled again, but this time the voice was different. Younger, strained. "This is First Officer Castellanos. We've lost primary hydraulics. Captain Reynolds we're working the problem." The silence that followed told Nadia everything. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, ignoring the flight attendant's protests. The aircraft was falling through 20,000 feet, the altimeter spinning in the cockpit she couldn't see but could feel in her bones. She'd spent 12 years reading instruments under pressure, another 6 teaching others to do the same. "Ma'am, you need to sit down." The attendant reached for her arm. Nadia caught her wrist gently. "How long have they been silent?" "What?" "The cockpit." "How long since the last transmission?" The attendant's face went pale. 2 minutes, maybe 3. Nadia was already moving toward the front of the aircraft, her body remembering the narrow passages of C-130 fuselages, the practiced duck and weave through equipment and personnel. A businessman grabbed her sleeve. "What the hell are you doing?" She looked at him with those gray eyes. "My job," she said. 23 years too late, but still my job." The cockpit door was locked, standard procedure post 9/11, but the senior flight attendant was already there with the emergency access code. Her hands shook as she entered the numbers. Nadia placed a hand over hers, steadying them. "Deep breath, we're okay." The door opened to controlled chaos. The captain slumped against his harness, conscious but gray-faced, left arm clutched to his chest. The first officer's hands danced across the panel, sweat darkening his collar. "We've got dual hydraulic failure, electrical backup is flickering, and I'm losing aileron authority." He turned, saw Nadia, and his professional composure cracked. "Ma'am, you can't be in here." "Captain Reynolds, can you hear me?" Nadia ignored the first officer, her voice cutting through with parade ground clarity. The captain's eyes focused on her with effort. "Chest pain. Can't feel my left arm. Heart attack." Nadia had seen it before, 15,000 feet over the Tangi Valley, her instructor pilot suddenly clutching his chest, leaving her alone with a dying helicopter and 4 souls in the back. She'd been 23 then. She was 47 now, and the intervening years had taught her that terror was just another form of turbulence. You flew through it or you didn't. "First Officer Castellanos, I need you to listen very carefully." She stepped fully into the cockpit, her presence somehow making the cramped space feel larger. "My name is Nadia Kress. I flew Apache and Black Hawks for 12 years, instructed at Fort Rucker for 6 more. I'm rated on fixed-wing through ATP. I'm going to help you bring this aircraft down safely." Castellanos stared at her, his youth suddenly obvious, maybe 30, probably 5,000 hours, none of them like this. "We're over the Rockies. Denver's 40 miles northeast, but we're losing altitude too fast. I don't think we can make it to a runway." "Then we don't need a runway," Nadia said, sliding into the jump seat behind the center console. "We need flat ground and enough control authority to not turn everyone into a crater. Show me what you have." Her voice was steady, almost gentle, the tone she'd used with terrified privates on their first combat mission. Castellanos' breathing slowed fractionally. He turned back to the instruments. Hydraulic systems A and B are gone. System C is at 15% and dropping. Flight controls are mostly manual, but the aircraft's heavy. I can barely get response from the yoke. Altitude and airspeed. 16,000 feet, descending at 3,500 feet per minute, 220 knots and climbing. Nadia's mind was already working the problem, muscle memory and procedural knowledge flowing together like a well-rehearsed symphony. The aircraft was too fast, too heavy, descending too quickly toward terrain that didn't forgive mistakes. She leaned forward, eyes scanning the panel. Power back to idle. Start configuring for emergency descent. We need to burn off speed and altitude in a controlled way. If I slow down too much without hydraulics, we'll lose what little control authority we have, Castellanos countered, but his hands were already moving to comply. He wasn't arguing, just thinking aloud, processing. Good. Fear could be useful if you channeled it. You're trading a long glide for maneuverability, Nadia agreed. But right now we're a lawn dart. We need to be a glider. Deploy spoilers if you can, anything to increase drag without losing lift. The aircraft shuddered as Castellanos worked the spoilers. The descent rate increased to 4,000 feet per minute, but the airspeed began to bleed off. Through the windscreen, the Rocky Mountains spread below them like broken teeth, snow-capped peaks reaching up with geological indifference. Nadia pulled the aviation chart from the side pocket, her fingers finding landmarks with practiced ease. There, she said, pointing to a section of high plateau. Former Air Force training range, decommissioned in 2018. 12,000 feet elevation, relatively flat, 17 miles northwest. Castellanos' eyes flicked to where she indicated, then back to his dying instruments. That's not a runway, that's just ground. It's packed earth and scrub brush, Nadia said, and it's the difference between a hard landing and a funeral. She keyed the radio herself, her thumb finding the transmit button like it had never left. Denver Center, this is United 2847 Heavy. Emergency descent, dual hydraulic failure, captain incapacitated. We're unable to maintain altitude. Requesting emergency vectors to Buckley Air Force Base or nearest suitable landing area. The response came immediately, a professional male voice with the slightest tremor of concern underneath. United 2847, Denver Center copies emergency. Buckley is 43 miles at your 1 o'clock, clearing all traffic. Emergency equipment is rolling. Denver Center, 2847. Negative on Buckley. Current rate of descent and terrain will put us in a mountainside before we get there. We're proceeding direct to coordinates 39.6 north, 105.3 west. There was a pause on the radio, longer than professional procedure allowed. When the controller came back, his voice was different, tighter, but also more focused. 2847, be advised those coordinates are unimproved terrain, former military reservation. No facilities, no emergency equipment. Copy that, Denver, but it's flat and it's close. We'll take our chances. Nadia's hand remained steady on the radio. Behind her, she could hear the captain's labored breathing, the flight attendant administering oxygen from the emergency bottle. The aircraft passed through 12,000 feet. Castellanos' knuckles were white on the yoke. I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe I'm attempting a dead-stick landing on a dirt field with a commercial airliner because some passenger says she used to fly helicopters. Not some passenger, Nadia said quietly. Her eyes never left the windscreen, scanning for the plateau that would either save them or kill them. And not just helicopters. Tell me, first officer, what do you see when you look at those mountains? Castellanos glanced at the approaching terrain, granite and snow and pine forests rising up to meet them. I see where we're going to die. I see the Hindu Kush. I see the Kajaki Ridge. I see every mountain range that ever tried to kill me, and I'm still here. Pointed ahead where the plateau was becoming visible through the atmospheric haze. That piece of ground, that's a gift, take it. The radio crackled again, but this time it was a different voice, older, authority layered beneath Western drawl. United 2847, this is Buckley Command Post. We're tracking your descent. Be advised we're scrambling SAR and medical to your projected landing coordinates. You've got about 4 minutes before you're on the ground one way or another. Copy, Buckley. 4 minutes. Nadia turned to Castellanos. Gear down or up? It was a pilot's question, one that had no perfect answer. Gear down meant more drag, more stability, but also more resistance on unprepared ground. Gear up meant a belly landing, less control, but possibly less catastrophic. Castellanos' Adam's apple bobbed. I don't know, this isn't in any manual. No, Nadia agreed. It's not, but you're the pilot in command. Captain's down, it's your airplane. What does your gut tell you? Aircraft dropped through 9,000 feet. The plateau was clearly visible now, a roughly oval expanse of brown earth and scattered vegetation, maybe 8,000 feet long and half that wide. Not a runway, not even close. But it was flat, and in this moment flat was everything. Castellanos made his decision. Gear stays up. We don't know what that ground is like. If there are rocks or erosion channels, the gear will just catch and flip us. Belly landing gives us the whole fuselage to absorb impact. Nadia nodded once. Good call. Now listen, we're going to come in as slow as we can while maintaining control. At this altitude, stall speed is higher than sea level. We'll be hot no matter what. The instant we touch down, I need you to cut all fuel to the engines. Minimize fire risk. You're talking like you're flying this thing, Castellanos said, but there was no heat in it. Just exhaustion and the beginning of trust. I'm not flying it. You are. I'm just the voice in your head that's done this before. It wasn't quite true. Nadia had never deadsticked a 737 onto a desert plateau. But she'd auto-rotated a dying Apache onto a goat path in the Argandab, had nursed a shot-up Black Hawk through a sandstorm with one engine and no hydraulics, had talked 3 different pilots through emergencies from the right seat when their hands froze and their brains locked up. This was just another version of the same dance, you and the machine and gravity negotiating terms. The radio erupted with multiple voices now. United 2847, Buckley Ops, SAR is airborne, medical is inbound by ground. 2847, Denver Center, we show you at 7,000 feet, rate of descent 4,200. United Dispatch is on the line requesting souls on board. Nadia keyed the mic. Denver Center 2847, 147 souls on board, 12 crew. Captain is down with suspected cardiac event. First Officer Castellanos is at the controls. We're 3 minutes from touchdown. Copy, 2847. God be with you. The controller's voice cracked slightly, and Nadia realized he was probably watching them on radar, watching the altitude tick down, knowing that in 3 minutes those souls would either walk away or they wouldn't. 6,000 feet. The plateau filled the windscreen now, details becoming clear, patches of sagebrush, the pale scar of an old dirt road, the rusted frame of some forgotten vehicle. Castellanos fought the yoked tiny corrections that translated to massive effort without hydraulic assistance. Sweat ran down his temples. Talk me through it, he said through gritted teeth. Airspeed 200 knots, altitude 5,000 feet above field elevation. We're coming in flat and fast, that's okay, that's what we want. Don't try to flare too early or we'll stall and drop like a brick. Let the ground come up. Let it come all the way up. Nadia's voice was hypnotic now, the rhythm of it matching the descent, pulling Castellanos into a zone where there was only the present moment, only the next input, the next correction. Behind them, the cabin had gone silent. 147 people strapped into their seats, watching the mountains rise outside their windows, knowing without being told that something was very wrong. The flight attendants had done their job, crash positions briefed, emergency exits identified, prayers whispered in 6 languages. 4,000 feet. The aircraft's shadow raced across the broken ground below, growing larger. Nadia could see the texture of the earth now, the way the afternoon sun cast shadows from every rock and plant. She calculated distance, closure rate, angle of descent, all the math her instructors had beaten into her at Fort Rucker, all the physics that didn't care about your rank or your fear. 3,000 feet, Castellanos called out. 180 knots. She's mushy, I'm losing elevator authority. Stay with her, you're doing fine. We're going to touch down long and fast and that's fine. There's room. 2,000 feet. Nadia found herself thinking about the last time she'd been this close to the ground this fast, the helicopter bleeding altitude over the Tangi Valley, rotor wash kicking up dust that turned the world into a brown void, Taliban bullets snapping through the air. She'd been thinking about her daughter that day, 8 years old, gap-toothed, waiting at Fort Campbell with Nadia's ex-husband, wondering if she'd ever see her again. She'd made it. She'd landed that helicopter with 3 bullet holes in the fuselage and hydraulic fluid spraying like arterial blood, had set it down so gently the crew chief had thought she'd done it on purpose, some kind of training exercise. She hadn't told them her hands were shaking so badly afterward she couldn't unbuckle her harness. 1,000 feet. Castellanos pulled back slightly on the yoke, the aircraft's nose rising a fraction, too early. "Hold what you have," Nadia said sharply. "Don't flare yet, not yet." The plateau rushed up at them, 200 tons of aluminum and fuel and humanity dropping through the thin mountain air at 3 times highway speed. Nadia could see individual plants now, the way the wind bent the grass, a hawk scattering from the path of their shadow. 500 feet. "Kill the cabin announcement system," Nadia said. "Brace, brace, brace." The flight attendant's voice echoed through the cabin, strong despite everything. "Brace, heads down, stay down, 300 feet. Nadia's hand found Castellanos' shoulder, a point of contact of presence. "You've got this, trust your hands, trust the machine, we're taking this airplane home." 200 feet. The ground was enormous now, filling everything, and there was nowhere to go but through. 100 feet. "Now," Nadia said. "Flare now, pull, pull." Castellanos hauled back on the yoke with everything he had, his whole body thrown into the effort. The nose came up, the tail dropped, and for a suspended instant they were a bird again, something graceful and defiant of gravity. Then the earth rose up and claimed them. The impact was a freight train hitting a wall, a sound beyond sound. The fuselage struck the plateau belly first, aluminum shrieking as it met stone and earth. The spine of the aircraft flexed like a living thing, absorbing energy that wanted to tear it apart. They slid forward in a storm of dust and debris, the world outside the windscreen turning into a brown chaos. Nadia heard herself shouting, "Cut fuel! Cut fuel!" And Castellanos' hand was already there, shutting down the engines even as they plowed through sagebrush and scattered rock. Something massive struck the underside, a boulder or an old foundation, and the aircraft slewed left, the wingtip catching earth and spinning them 15 degrees. Metal screamed. Somewhere in the cabin, an overhead compartment tore free. The deceleration was brutal, physics extracting its price in bruised ribs and whiplashed necks, but they were slowing. They were stopping, and they weren't burning. The Boeing 737 came to rest at an angle, nose pointing toward the mountains, tail section crumpled but intact. Dust settled around them like snow. For 3 heartbeats there was only silence. Then Castellanos moved, his hands flying through the shutdown checklist with autopilot precision. Battery off, fuel shutoff confirmed, fire bottles armed. His voice was mechanical, shock delaying the emotional response. Nadia was already moving, turning to the captain. Reynolds was conscious, gray-faced but breathing. "Stay still, sir. Help is coming." She looked at the flight attendant hovering in the doorway, her face streaked with tears and dust. "Evacuate. All exits, now." The cabin erupted into controlled chaos. The flight attendants moved through their procedures with professional grace despite shaking hands, opening doors, deploying slides that inflated with sounds like gunshots. Passengers streamed out into the mountain afternoon, some crying, some silent, all alive. Nadia helped Castellanos extract himself from his seat, watched him stumble toward the exit like a man underwater. Then she turned back to Captain Reynolds, helped unbuckle his harness, got her shoulder under his good arm. "Come on, Captain, let's get you out of your office." Outside, the plateau had become a scene from a disaster movie. 147 passengers scattered across the scrubland, flight attendants doing head counts, checking for injuries. In the distance, the whump-whump of helicopter rotors grew louder. 2 Black Hawks appeared over the Ridgeline Air Force SAR birds with red crosses on their sides. Nadia stood in the shadow of the crippled aircraft, dust on her clothes, her hands finally starting to shake. A passenger approached her, the businessman from 12C, the one who'd grabbed her sleeve during the descent. "You," he said. "You saved us. You saved all of us." She shook her head. "First Officer Castellano saved us. He was the one flying the airplane. But you—" "I was just a passenger," Nadia said quietly. "Just someone who remembered what to do when things went wrong." The Black Hawks touched down in tandem, medical teams spilling out with stretchers and equipment. The senior paramedic, a woman with sergeant's stripes and kind eyes, went straight to Captain Reynolds. But the pilot who emerged from the lead helicopter, a major with weathered features and a flight suit adorned with more patches than bare fabric, walked directly to Nadia. "You're the one who called in the landing coordinates?" the major asked. Up close, Nadia could see the name tape, RODRIGUEZ. His eyes were scanning her the way pilots read other pilots' posture, hand positions, the small signs of someone who'd done the job. "Yes, sir. That was good work. Saved us precious minutes getting SAR positioned." He glanced at the wounded aircraft, then back at her. "You have military aviation experience. 12 years, a PASH and Black Hawks. Retired as a CW-4 in 2018. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose. "Chief Warrant Officer, you flew attack helicopters. Among other things." Something shifted in Rodriguez's expression, a kind of professional respect clicking into place. "The controller at Denver Center said you helped the first officer bring her down. That true?" "I offered suggestions, sir. He did the flying." With no hydraulics on an aircraft he'd never dead-sticked before, onto a dirt field in the mountains. Rodriguez's voice had gone quiet. "Ma'am, I've been flying for 22 years. I wouldn't have tried what you just did." "Respectfully, sir, you would have. When it's the only option, you take it." A voice crackled from Rodriguez's radio. "Buckley SAR 1, this is Denver Center. Be advised, media is requesting information on the landing. They're asking about reports that a passenger helped in the cockpit. Can you confirm?" Rodriguez looked at Nadia for a long moment. "Ma'am, there's going to be questions." "A lot of questions. The FAA, the NTSB, probably every news outlet in the country. You willing to talk to them?" Nadia turned to look at the passengers, scattered across the plateau like scattered seeds. A mother holding two children, an elderly couple supporting each other. Castellano sitting on the ground, head in his hands, alive. "I'll talk to whoever needs answers," she said. "But the story is simple. The first officer did his job under impossible circumstances. The crew did their jobs. Everyone did exactly what they were trained to do." "And you?" Nadia met his eyes. "I did what I was trained to do 23 years ago, sir. I just never thought I'd need it on a commercial flight." Rodriguez nodded slowly, then keyed his radio. "Denver Center, Buckley SAR 1. Confirm passenger assistance in cockpit. Former Army Aviation, CW-4. She helped talk the first officer through an emergency landing. All souls accounted for, multiple injuries, none critical." "It's a damn miracle." The news trucks arrived within the hour, satellite dishes unfolding like mechanical flowers. Nadia watched them from a distance, sitting on a rock outcropping while paramedics checked her vitals and handed her a bottle of water she didn't remember accepting. She'd done interviews before, after-action reports, formal debriefs, that one time a journalist embedded with her unit for a week. But this felt different. That had been war. This was supposed to be peacetime. A young reporter approached, microphone in hand, cameraman trailing behind. "Excuse me, are you Nadia Kress, the passenger who helped land the plane?" Nadia looked at her, this earnest woman in her 20s with perfect makeup and determination in her eyes. "I'm Nadia Kress. I'm not sure I'd say I landed anything. But you were in the cockpit. You have military flight experience." "I do. 12 years as an Army helicopter pilot." The reporter's eyes lit up. "Can you tell us what happened up there? What was going through your mind?" What was going through her mind? Nadia almost laughed. How did you explain to someone who'd never been there what it felt like to hold death at arm's length, to negotiate with physics and fate? How did you tell them about the quiet voice that lived in every combat pilot's head, the one that said keep flying, keep working the problem, keep your crew alive? "I was thinking that First Officer Castellanos needed someone to help him run procedures," Nadia said carefully. "The captain was incapacitated. The aircraft was in trouble. I had relevant experience, so I offered to help, that's all. But you chose the landing site. You made the call to attempt this instead of trying to reach an airport. I made a recommendation based on terrain, altitude, and rate of descent. The first officer made the decision. He was pilot in command. That distinction matters. The reporter pressed closer. There are witnesses who say you were incredibly calm, that you saved everyone's lives. Nadia's jaw tightened. Ma'am, with respect, the person who saved lives today was a first officer barely out of his 20s who kept his head during a nightmare scenario and flew a crippled aircraft to the ground without killing anyone. That's where your story is, not with me. The interview went on for another 10 minutes, but Nadia's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the moment the wheels had left the ground in Fort Campbell, her last flight as a military pilot, the way the landscape had spread below her like a promise she wasn't sure she'd keep. She'd retired at 39, burned out and empty, her marriage already dissolved, her daughter distant in the way teenagers become distant. She'd thought she was done with aviation. Thought she'd become an analyst somewhere, push paper, consult on procurement contracts, let younger pilots do the flying. Now, sitting on this plateau with the wreckage of United 2847 behind her, she realized she'd never stopped being a pilot. You didn't take off the identity like a uniform. It lived in your hands, your instincts, the way you read the sky. By sunset, the story was everywhere. Phones that had survived the landing uploaded photos and videos, the descent, the impact, the evacuation. Someone had captured Nadia helping Captain Reynolds from the cockpit, her face set with concentration, his arm across her shoulders. The image went viral within hours, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. By the next morning, she sat quietly and 7A was trending on social media. The networks picked it up. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all wanted interviews. The story had everything: danger, heroism, a mystery woman who'd appeared from nowhere and vanished into the investigation. The NTSB set up in an airport hangar 60 miles away, and Nadia found herself in a gray room with gray chairs, recounting every second of the flight to investigators who recorded every word. They were professional, thorough, and clearly fascinated. "Ms. Kress," the lead investigator said, "you made a split-second decision to enter the cockpit and provide assistance. That's not standard procedure for passengers, even those with aviation experience. What made you believe you should intervene?" Nadia thought about it. "I listened to the first officer's voice when he came on the intercom. I heard controlled fear, someone holding it together but close to the edge. I heard the absence of the captain. And I knew that sometimes the difference between making it and not making it is having someone else in the room who's been scared before and lived through it." The investigator nodded. "Walk me through your decision-making process once you were in the cockpit." And so Nadia did, step by step, word by word. The hydraulics failure, the altitude loss, the terrain assessment, the choice of landing site. As she spoke, she watched the investigators' faces, saw them processing not just what she said but how she said it. This wasn't luck or chance. This was training meeting opportunity, experience meeting crisis. When the debrief finally ended, 6 hours later, the lead investigator shook her hand. "Ms. Kress, in 30 years of accident investigation, I've never seen anything quite like this. The first officer credits you with saving that aircraft. The passengers call you a hero, but I get the sense that's not how you see it." "No, sir," Nadia said. "I see a plane that didn't break up in flight when it should have. I see a first officer who performed beyond his experience level. I see flight attendants who kept 147 people from panicking. I see a lot of things going right that usually go wrong. And I see," the investigator said quietly, "a chief warrant officer who never really left the service. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Kress. We'll be in touch if we have follow-up questions." Outside the hangar, Rodriguez was waiting. The major had traded his flight suit for service dress, ribbons spanning his chest like a colorful history lesson. "Ms. Kress." "Got a minute?" "Of course, sir." They walked toward the flight line, where a pair of Black Hawks sat in revetments, rotors tied down against the evening wind. Rodriguez's hands were in his pockets, his posture relaxed in the way of career aviators who were comfortable in their own skin. "I did some checking on you," he said. "Hope you don't mind. Called a few people I know at Fort Rucker and Campbell. Asked about a CW-4 Cress who flew attack helicopters. Nadia said nothing, just waited. Turns out you've got quite a reputation. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Air Medals with Valor, a Distinguished Flying Cross from that mess in Helmand in 2012. You pulled a 4-man patrol out of an ambush with a shot-to-hell Apache, flew at 20 miles on one engine and a prayer. A lot of pilots did a lot of brave things in Afghanistan, sir. Yeah, but most of them are still flying. You retired at 39. That's young for a chief. Rodriguez stopped walking, turned to face her directly. Why'd you punch out Cress? You were good, really good. People I talked to said you were the best instructor they ever had. Said you could talk someone through anything, keep them calm when the world was on fire. Nadia looked past him, out at the mountains turning purple in the twilight. I got tired, sir. Tired of being scared. Tired of coming home and not being able to turn it off. My daughter was 10 when I left for my 3rd deployment. When I came back, she was 11 and she looked at me like I was a stranger. My ex-husband had already filed papers. I realized I'd given the army everything and it had cost me everything else. That's honest, Rodriguez said. Probably more honest than most people would be. You asked, sir. I did, and now I'm going to ask something else. Rodriguez's expression shifted, became more serious. How'd it feel being back in the cockpit, even for those few minutes? Nadia considered the question. How did it feel? Like coming home to a house you'd abandoned, like hearing a song you'd loved and forgotten, like being someone you'd once been and weren't sure you could be anymore. It felt right, she said quietly. It felt like the only thing I've done in years that made sense. Rodriguez nodded as if she'd confirmed something. The first officer, Castellanos, he asked about you, wanted to know if you'd be willing to talk to him off the record. I think he's processing what happened, needs to understand how he got through it. I'll talk to him, Nadia said. Of course. Good, because I think you two need each other right now. You helped him through the impossible. Maybe he can help you figure out what comes next. Rodriguez started to walk away, then paused. One more thing, Cress. That call sign you used on the radio when you were talking to Denver Center, you didn't use one. Kept it professional, kept it clean. But my co-pilot, she was Army before she commissioned Air Force. She said if she had to guess, someone with your record probably had a call sign worth remembering. Nadia smiled slightly, the first real smile since the landing. They called me Longshot, sir, because I kept taking missions everyone said couldn't be done, and I kept coming back. Longshot, Rodriguez repeated, tasting the word. Yeah, that fits. He walked away across the tarmac, leaving Nadia alone with the wind and the mountains and the weight of a name she hadn't spoken aloud in 7 years. Longshot. It had started as mockery, actually. Her first deployment, her first real combat mission, inserting a special forces team into a hot landing zone at night, in weather that had grounded every other pilot in the task force. The mission commander had looked at the forecast and the target and said it was a long shot at best. Nadia had said she'd take those odds. She delivered the team, taken fire, lost hydraulics, and still made it back to base. After that, it stuck. Every mission that seemed impossible, every scenario that made other pilots shake their heads, they'd send Longshot. And she'd go. Not because she was fearless, she'd been terrified more times than she could count. But because someone had to go, and fear wasn't a reason to leave people behind. Now, standing on this Air Force base, she wondered if that part of her had ever really retired or if it had just been waiting dormant for someone to need her again. Her phone buzzed. Text messages had been flooding in since the landing. Old squadron mates, former students, even her ex-husband with a terse, saw the news, glad you're okay. But this message was from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Cress, this is Javier Castellanos. Major Rodriguez gave me your number. I know you probably don't want to be bothered, but I'd really appreciate a chance to talk. I need to understand what happened up there. What you did. Coffee. Beer, I'll buy. Nadia stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, tomorrow morning, 700, I'll find you. She didn't add that she needed to understand it too, needed to figure out why the universe had put her in seat 7A on that particular flight, on that particular day, when a captain's heart decided to fail, and hydraulics decided to quit, and a first officer needed someone who understood what it meant to be scared and do the job anyway. Maybe there were no accidents. Maybe there were just pilots, waiting for the moment when they'd be needed again. The morning came cold and clear, the kind of mountain dawn that made you believe the world was new. Nadia found Castellanos in the hotel restaurant, sitting alone at a corner table, staring into a cup of coffee like it held answers. He looked up when she approached, and she saw the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly before he controlled them. He was 28, she'd learned from the investigation. 5 years out of flight school. 3,000 hours, mostly regional routes. A good pilot having a career-average day until the universe decided to test him. "Ms. Kress," he started to stand, but she waved him down. "Nadia, and you're Javier, right? Not first officer." "Yeah, Javier," he managed a weak smile. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "You asked. I don't ignore distress signals." She ordered coffee black and they sat in uncomfortable silence until it arrived. Then Javier said, "I keep replaying it. The moment I saw the hydraulics fail. The moment I realized the captain was down. I keep thinking about how I froze for maybe 3 seconds, just completely locked up, and then you were there." "You didn't freeze," Nadia corrected. "You processed. 3 seconds is nothing. I've seen pilots lock up for 3 minutes, long enough to kill everyone. You kept working the problem. But I didn't know what to do. I was running procedures, but I didn't have a plan. I was just reacting." "That's flying," Nadia said. "Especially emergency flying. You react, you assess, you adapt. You did exactly that." Javier shook his head. "You had a plan the second you walked through that door."